Get in the know. Non-stop Vikings talk. It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Football.
And we come to you today with another historical pie chart. We started doing these in the summer of 2023. We said this is kind of a fun little catalog of Vikings history. We do pie chart of praise and pie chart of blame after each Vikings regular season game. So let's go back and take a look at historical games. We can even do historical moments. At some point, maybe we do like a pie chart of blame for trades. It can kind of be taken anywhere. But Judd, you and I were both at the historical Adrian Peterson 296-yard record-breaking rushing day back on November 4th, 2007. And you have a pie chart of praise for that historical performance, a 35-17 win by the Vikings over the Chargers.
Yes, a day that I think back in our days doing a show together on 1500, if I'm not mistaken, we talked to Brooks Bollinger about this game because he's the quarterback that came in to replace, at the time, the injured Tavares Jackson. This was a game which had a lot of twists and turns. For a blowout, it ended up being a pretty interesting game because there were a lot of things that could have gone wrong, including for Peterson himself, and then, of course, I was reading a piece that Mark Craig of the Star Tribune did a couple of years ago on this game, talking to Brad Childress. And Brad Childress said, my most memorable moment from that game was actually the Antonio Cromartie return of the Ryan Longwell field goal attempt for a touchdown right before halftime. So it was an interesting game. But yes, I do have a pie chart. So let's get to it.
Before we get fully into the pie chart,
The Rock knows how you feel about pie.
Let's lay out sort of because you brought up a couple things in the game, just for people that either are too young to have seen it or for people that don't remember it. Vikings win 35-17. It was 7-7 at the end of the first half, and the Vikings attempted a long field goal, like you said, with Ryan Longwell, who doesn't have the longest leg at the time. Cromartie returns that kick from the back of the end zone, 109 yards. It was short, obviously, of the goalpost. Returns at 109 yards. I'm pretty sure the Vikings got booed off the field, if I remember correctly. There was some boos raining down. Because coming into this game, the Vikings were they 3-5, I want to say, because it was week 9. So their season was kind of off the rails a little bit. They eventually came back and evened up to 500 in this season. But in the second and Adrian Peterson didn't even have 70 yards rushing in the first half. They wind up in the second half tying the game right away in the third quarter and then going on a big run and winning it 35-17. Crazy names in this game. You had Phillip Rivers and LaDainian Tomlinson as the two main offensive players for the Chargers. Norv Turner, who became Vikings offensive coordinator a few years later, was the head coach in this one. Vincent Jackson was one of the top 2 receivers for the Chargers in this game. He was rumored to maybe be traded to the Vikings 2 years later before Brett Favre, or was it a year or two? I think it was before. Or was it the Randy Moss? It was 2010. Randy Moss, right?
Yep, it was 2010.
And then on the Viking side, Tavares Jackson winds up suffering a concussion, gets knocked out in this game. Brooks Bollinger comes in to hand the ball off to Adrian Peterson. Chester Taylor also ran 9 times for 60 yards and a touchdown, in addition to Peterson's 296. So the Vikings in this game, they ran the ball, including Chester Taylor, 43 times for 378 yards and 4 touchdowns. So just wanted to lay out sort of the stats of this game and the landscape of this thing. 26 first downs to 14 for the Chargers. And later on, Pro Football Focus went back and did grades for this game. So we will look at the PFF grades and see how much they match up to your pie chart.
All right. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the rare opportunity to start a pie chart at the top, not the bottom, because it's actually it's more fun as you go than it is to ascend. And keep in mind too, another familiar name in this game was the Chargers defensive coordinator was Ted Cottrell, who had been Mike Tice's DC here. So his defense was responsible for what still remains as the greatest single game rushing wise, and a game that, as we'll point out, could have easily been over 300 yards for Adrian Peterson. All right. So let's start at the top. And I did this because it wasn't going to be as much fun I mean, you could give Peterson, 50%. You could give him 60%. He had a phenomenal day. But I'm only going to give him 35% because there were so many other people that deserve credit and or blame for this historic performance, which, by the way, did include, of course, a signature Adrian Peterson fumble and turnover as well. So as I went back and watched the carries from this game, I had forgotten that he did lose the ball. So it was a very Peterson-esque game.
Yeah, that's
all
classic.
Right. So 35% goes to the star of the show who broke the record that had been set, I think it was 2 years earlier, Jamal Lewis of Baltimore against the new Cleveland Browns. And what's funny is the commonality tie there is Chester Taylor was the backup to both of them.
Yeah.
He was there the day that Jamal Lewis, as the backup, set the record for Baltimore. He was there, as you mentioned, the day that Adrian Peterson set the mark. All right.
That's crazy. Peterson was just like a raging bull in this game.
Yeah, he was.
As he was in every game he played in. But it's just going back and watching his running style. You don't see it at all in today's NFL. Most of those running backs are a little bit lower to the ground style, more scat back type. And he was a right tackle playing running back, basically.
Ball flying around too, like the loose arm with the ball. And the most, I thought the most Peterson-esque run of the entire game was not the long touchdown runs. It was the one where he is actually going towards the sideline. It's a play on which he collides with an official and basically pushes the official out of his way. He's going towards the sideline. And as the CBS analyst, Dan Deerdorf, points out, instead of just going out of bounds, he actually stops and cuts back up and tries to take on more guys, which at the time seemed cool, but it led to some of his problems too, because, there's just times that you probably don't want to put the ball in jeopardy. And his unwillingness to just call a play dead was noble, but dangerous. Yeah. But that play to me was, in retrospect now, having covered, and we both did, his entire career here, that was the most Peterson-like play, because it's like it was never good enough to be like, you know what, dude, take the 15 yards and live to fight another down. Instead, he literally stops and looks for guys to take on. So
yeah, he didn't have it in his DNA to just get, it was almost it was a pride thing or an ego thing to make sure that he wasn't the one that ended the play by going out of bounds. He wanted to get one last shot in at you. So okay, 35% to Adrian Peterson.
All right, 20%. Another pretty obvious one goes to an offensive line that was Bryant McKinney, Steve Hutchinson, Matt Burke, who threw, I saw a few just absolutely key blocks at center. Right guard was Anthony Herrera. And I had forgotten Ryan Cook, who was drafted out of New Mexico State as a center, and I think moved to guard, now was playing right tackle.
Yeah.
Ryan Cook, who was a Fran Foley draft pick, as I recall, and was much maligned during a lot of his career here. So McKinney, Hutchinson, who obviously now is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame and is one of the great guards of all time, Matt Burke, Herrera, and Cook get 20%.
It is, it's funny, Ryan Cook, just one of those forgotten names in Vikings history. It's also rare to be drafted as a center and then make your way out. Most of the time, you were a tackle in college, and then they move you to guard. Centers are kind of their own breed, but he was the rare one that kind of moved outside. And I was watching back this game too, and that offensive line, they could get after it in the run game. Man, they were nimble, but they were big and nasty. Bryant McKinney and Steve Hutchinson. I mean, tough to find a better left side of an offensive line in the NFL in 2007. But yeah, I think I'm curious to see what the rest. I mean, the fact that you have 45% remaining, and we're through the offensive line and Adrian Peterson. This should be interesting.
Oh, we're gonna have some fun now. Now it gets to be fun. So I was going through this pie chart and saying to myself, I could give out, and there is plenty of credit that go to players, but there were other things that day at least did not come to light. They came to light much later after the fact, but we all knew at the time that Peterson was sort of haphazardly hurried back in the game to set the record.
Yeah,
which was weird, because basically the coaching staff had said, you know what, dude, you've been great. The game's done. Sit down. Yeah. Hey, Chester Taylor, get in there. And Chester, to your point, Phil, had some nice runs. But Adrian Peterson, when he came out, was 3 yards away from the record. 3 yards away. So 15% of this pie chart go to our friends in, at the time, Vikings media relations, Bob Hagan and Tom West. Because Bob is the one who told Tom, oh my God, he's 3 yards from the record. Fortunately, as Bob was quoted as saying in that Star Tribune story I referenced before, Bob basically said, you know, if this was a close game, it's very tough to tell the coaching staff, put a guy back in. But at this point in time, the game was done as far as the score went. The Chargers weren't going to come back. So Bob told Tom West. Tom West ran upstairs at the old Metrodome to the coach's booth and had them tell the guys on the sidelines, get Peterson back in. He's 3 yards from the record. If Bob doesn't open his mouth and Tom doesn't go upstairs, I don't think they put him back in. Like, how would you know? How would you know? Because the weird thing was, as brilliant as Peterson was in the second half, his first half had been so blasé that you like weren't thinking, because I didn't think that game, I never thought, oh my God, he is going to set the record. So 15% go to two guys who recognized NFL history was in jeopardy of not being set and actually took action, good for them, to make sure that it was set.
It's a great story. So just remembering back to the Metrodome press box, so Bob would have been on the field, like roaming the sidelines, right? Was Tom sitting in the press box? Or did Tom have to climb up steps to go up the ramp, steps, elevator?
According to the story Mark Craig wrote, like in 2016, it sounds like they were upstairs at the time.
Okay.
So now you go down to the field quickly because it takes or early because it takes a long time to get down there. I think at the time, because if you recall, the Metrodome stairwell down to the locker room was right there. Mm-hmm. So I think what happened was, I think the Vikings had other PR people on the field, and Bob and Tom were still in the press box. So Tom could just sprint up the stairs to what was the coach's box and broadcasting boxes and go tell the coaches upstairs, call down to the field. So I think that's how it worked. I want to say at that time, it might have been, at that point in time, 2007, I think they had a PR assistant there on the field post game.
Evan.
He went to work for the Texans.
Yeah.
I forget his last name.
I liked Evan.
But I think he was down on I think he might have been on the field, and Bob and Tom might have gone down eventually. But I mean, the Metrodome was such a ma and pa shop as far as a press box.
Who's now like a vice president, C-level. I think he was on that PR.
Was he there in 2007? Yeah, I think you're right. So anyway,
I'm going through the game log. So Peterson, I'm trying to see when the record breaking
run
was.
Very late.
Was it it was with it was under 2 minutes.
Yep.
So the Chargers it's funny because the Vikings pulled Adrian. The Vikings were up 28-17. Yep. They pulled Adrian from the game. He ran the ball a couple times, and then Chester came in, and Chester ran for 34 yards on one play. Yes. And he winds up scoring a touchdown to finish off that drive, and now it's 35-17. Chargers get it back with 4.5 left. And that was it. So Peterson, his last carry before them was with 7 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and then Chester takes the drive home because Peterson's at freaking 250 or whatever. And then so they put Peterson back in for the under 2. He runs for 35 yards on the first play of their last drive, up 18 with $1:58 left. And then they put Chester in for the next play. Mm-hmm. And then they ran Peterson back out to get the 3 yards, I think, that put him over the top with 1:04 left. So
how about that?
Fascinating.
So without those two guys, the record might not be broken, and it would have been a shame. So 15%, Bob and Tom, great work there.
Nice job.
All right, 10% goes to a guy who, as I watched Adrian's variety of runs that day, threw at least a couple of key blocks here. And this guy was not a great player at the time, but he could block. And I remember I did a story at the time for the Strib on this. I want to say it was Wednesday or Thursday was what, at that time, wide receivers coach George Stewart called blocking like Wednesday. And they would spend almost the entire practice working on blocking, which is for receivers, they hate to block. But Robert Ferguson, who they had gotten from the Packers, Robert Ferguson was really good at blocking. And if you go back and watch, he threw a key block on a 64-yard touchdown run by AP and a key block on a 46-yard touchdown run. And yes, it might seem small, but those blocks were instrumental, downfield blocks, on the move blocks. So 10% goes to him in particular, because I think of all of the receivers who were blocking that day, he actually threw two of the most important blocks on long touchdown runs. And it was basically those long runs that got Peterson so close to the record. So Robert Ferguson, the former Packer, tough as nails, 10%.
Also, a fairly recent, as we record this, random Viking of the week. Robert Ferguson.
I missed out on that one. Damn it.
Nice job, man. Wow. Yeah, you got to have some pretty good blocking on the edges if you're going to run for 296 yards.
Yep.
So nice job.
Stu
Rob.
was very pleased. All right. Now we're down to 4 slices remaining of 5% each.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh, yeah. We're going full bore here. We're not going to cheat the customers. All right. 5% goes to a hoss in the blocking game, because that's what he did. Jimmy Kleinsasser. The tight end H-back.
Yeah.
You go and watch AP's runs that day, and I'm going to tell you right now, big Jimmy Kleinsasser's fingerprints are all over those runs. He gets 5% just for his willingness to do grunt work was just incredible. He's really good at it.
He is the epitome of a grunt work football player, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember as a kid, because he was there kind of in the late 90s into the early 2000s. And I think he like 1999 or 2000 drafted.
99, I think, second round pick. Small college,
And as a kid, I was like in my teens watching those late 90s, early 2000s teams. I always kind of wondered, like, what's the deal with this Jim Kleinsasser guy? He's like, tight ends are supposed to catch passes, right? And running backs are supposed to be fast and nimble, and he's not really either one of those things. And then, like, the later in life you start to appreciate the grunt work football players, the C.J. Hams, the Tony Richardsons. Oh. Wasn't he also a part of this
team?
He
was on this team, yeah. I didn't see him throw a ton of key blocks. I was aching to give T. Rich some love, because I was a big T. Rich guy.
Yeah.
But I didn't see him throw a ton of key blocks. But every time that there was a scrum, every time it got to be some snot-nosed football, Jimmy Kleinsasser involved. North Dakota, second round, 1999.
There you go.
Football.
Jimmy Kleinsasser.
Lifetime Viking, Jimmy Kleinsasser. 5% to you.
Love it.
Okay, 5% goes to a guy by the name of Luis Castillo. He was the Chargers end who was actually instrumental in that game in the first half of setting the edge, and he's part of the reason why Peterson at halftime was not having a great game. But in the third quarter, he got hurt. He got hurt, and that opened the floodgates for Peterson to turn the corner, and those zone runs all of a sudden started to work. So the fortune of Castillo, if Castillo does not get hurt, dare I say Peterson has a very good day, but not a historically great day. So 5% goes to the fortune that came from the misfortune of one of the Chargers' top guys, or top guy when it came to, as the footballers say, Phil, setting the edge.
Set the edge. Let's set the edge. Also, I believe that was the era where both the Chargers and the Twins had players named Luis Castillo.
I didn't think of it that way. You're right. They did. They did.
Yeah, so, he was a former first round pick, by the way, Luis Castillo. 28th overall out of Northwestern. He was a Northwestern guy.
Okay, interesting.
Okay, good for him.
Interesting. So his demise in that game helped mightily in the second half. All right. 2 slices of 5% left.
I love this. It's a great pie.
5% goes to the aforementioned and now tragically late Tavares Jackson, who, as you pointed out, suffered a concussion. That brought in Brooks Bollinger, who was a backup. If you go back and look at the ratio in that game, the Vikings threw the ball 22 times and ran it 43 times. If you have quarterbacks that you trust, Peterson probably doesn't set the record just based on workload.
So Tavares Jackson and Brooks Bollinger being incompetent starting quarterbacks makes the pie chart. I love this.
Brad always talked about, Childress always talked about, I think his term was, and it's not just his, but I think the term is you don't want to get left-handed, which means, to be too much run or too much pass. This game was the definition of the Vikings got left-handed and it worked. So 5% goes to quarterbacks who they really didn't trust entirely. And once Peterson started to roll, the Vikings probably very wisely said, screw it.
Yeah,
and allowed it to happen.
It's amazing because they were averaging, I think, more yards per rush than they were averaging per throw, which is a pretty rare thing in a football game. But they did, when they did throw the ball, they were pretty effective off play action, I'm assuming, right? Without going back and tabulating them all. They wound up with, Brooks Bollinger wound up with a 133 passer rating on 10 throws in this game. Touchdown, no picks. Because, you show that play action and 11 defenders take 4 steps forward.
And you just don't throw it much. And your rating goes up.
Yes.
So 5% goes to quarterbacks who were trusted to do a very specific small set of things that allowed 28 to have a marvelous day. And then that leaves us with 5% left. And right now you're saying, okay, Judd, you gave PR guys 15%. That's the craziest thing I've ever heard in a pie chart. It can't get any crazier than that. Oh, no, it can. In my research for this very show, I found out that I should give 5% to the Chargers for nothing they did on the field. But the year before, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Norv Turner replaced Marty Schottenheimer as coach. Mm-hmm. And the year before, there were issues with the Chargers breaking curfew. So Norv Turner in 2007 said, okay, boys, here's how we're going to fix it. For home games, we're staying in a hotel. And for road games, we're going to go in 2 days early. So I have you in a hotel on Friday night and Saturday. So you can't go out and party on Friday at home. Well, guess who found a way to get out on Friday night and mix it up? And reportedly, several got back to their room well after curfew. That's right. Wow. Your San Diego Chargers.
Nice job, Chargers.
So 5%, and supposedly there were some guys feeling the effects of Friday night on Sunday. So 5% goes to a Chargers team that decided a good time would be had probably at the local and Brits and a couple of clubs on Friday night. 5% goes to the Chargers partying ways as part of Peterson's success.
Amazing. Wow, dude. Great pie chart here. That's a great pie chart.
Knows how you feel about pie.
A couple other notes off that Chargers team. So the year before, they went 14-2 under Marty Schottenheimer. And I think they fired Schottenheimer because he couldn't win a playoff game. Didn't they have a crazy owner at the time, 15, 20 years ago?
Alex Spanos?
Yes.
Yep. I think the Spanos family still owns the team. I think they just moved it to Los Angeles.
Okay. And then AJ Smith was their general manager.
Yeah. Yep.
But Norv Turner replaced a 14-2 Marty Schottenheimer, comes in, and that I forgot that 2007, because at the time, I remember at the time they weren't a great team because they were coming in, they were 4-3 coming in, the Chargers were. They lose that game to drop to 4-4. They only lost, that was November 4th, week 9. They only lost one more game until the conference championship.
Yep. They came
so this
back
was
strong.
like Phillip Rivers' big coming out party as an NFL quarterback this year. Mm-hmm. And yeah, they went on at the end of the regular season, they won 6 consecutive games, including a 51-14 win over the Lions at home. And then they waltzed into the playoffs. They beat the Titans in the first round 17-6. They go into Indianapolis against Peyton Manning and knock off the Colts in the divisional round 28-14. And then they played the Patriots in the conference championship game. That was the undefeated Patriots team until the Super Bowl, of course.
Yep.
And they played a close game against the Patriots, man. Like it was 14-12 Patriots until halfway through the fourth quarter, and then the Patriots scored. So pretty good. PFF went back and they graded this game with their video scouts. So I'll just give you a few.
So when did they do this? Like a couple of years ago, or
I think PFF launched they might have launched around 07 or 09. I know that they were for sure grading games in 2010 because we actually hired Sam Munson to work as like a contributor at 1500 ESPN. And then I think they've spent some time now just going back into like the early 2000s and just grading games. So they had this game graded. I won't do the whole Judd guesses the PFF grades, but Adrian Peterson was the highest graded player at 91.9, obviously. Okay. Tied with Steve Hutchinson, also had a 91.9 grade.
Yep.
Sidney Rice, Ryan Cook, and Bryant McKinney all had grades over 80. The worst graded players in this game offensively were Andre Allison.
Oh, yeah.
The wide receiver.
I saw him in the box score, yes.
Tavares Jackson. And Jim Kleinsasser actually got dinged.
Okay, that's crap. I'm out.
They liked him in run blocking, but he committed 2 penalties in this game, and he wasn't great on the passing plays, I guess.
But he was blocking.
He was blocking on the run plays.
That's all we asked for the sauce.
Yeah. On the let's dig a little deeper here on the running game. I'm just kind of curious. So rushing stats. Adrian Peterson had 158 yards after contact. 9 missed tackles forced, which seems a little low, actually. He averaged 10 yards per carry. And let's see here. Rushing direction. They go really deep on these stats. So rushing they were kind of all over the place. They spread their rushing attack. I was trying to see if they like went at the left side or the right side. It was literally just
AP didn't care.
Even across the board. They just they didn't pick on one guy. They just went across the board even. So So there you go, man. Judd's pie chart of praise for the greatest rushing performance.
Knows how you feel about pie.
Bob Hague and Tom West.
NFL history.
Save the Vikings bacon. We'd be talking about Jamal Lewis's record standing to this day because the Vikings screwed up if it weren't for the 2 PR guys that made sure it happened.
And you would have gone down there. I think at the time you were the lead Vikings beat writer for the Star Tribune. You would have gone there and said, hey, Chili, did you know that
Seifert.
Seifert was in there?
It was Seifert at the time. Yeah, Seifert would have had to.
Did you guys know that Adrian was just a few yards away from breaking the record? Were you aware of his yardage?
Oh, can you imagine the questions that would have come? Oh, my God. And Chili, that's 07. So Chili was not exactly the most popular guy.
No, he was wound up pretty tight.
I believe that season came to an end in Denver with the Vikings having a chance. I think the Cowboys had to lose and the Vikings had to win to make the playoffs. The Vikings lost to the Broncos, and that, of course, will live forever as the last game for Troy Williamson, who had the ball go. He had one ball go off his face mask on probably the best throw I saw Tavares Jackson make deep ball wise, and then he dropped, I think, a crossing route. Yeah,
I'm kind of going through the game by game here. It was incredible because they beat the Falcons to start the season, and Peterson had that big 60-yard swing pass touchdown.
Wheel route.
But a wheel route. They lost 3 consecutive games to drop to 1-3. They go out, they beat the Bears in Chicago, another Peterson breakout game.
Yep.
But then they get smoked by Dallas. They lose at home to Philadelphia. So now they're 2-5 coming into this Chargers game. And that's why the crowd was booing at halftime. I distinctly remember because I was also in the press box working for KFAN.
Oh, yeah. Time. They were pissed.
So the fans think they just gave up a 109-yard missed field goal return. The Vikings are about to be 2-6, and they turn it around. So they go they win this game. Then the next week, the ultimate emotional letdown. They go into Green Bay the next week. Peterson tears part of his knee up, and they lose 34-0 at Lambeau Field to Brett Favre and company.
Bollinger started too.
Yep.
That's where T-Jack he flat out got benched because I think he was healthy enough to play.
But then Peterson misses only a couple of games with like 2 torn ligaments in his knee. He didn't tear the ACL, but it was like a sprain. It wasn't fully torn, but it was like sprained LCL or something. But then they go on a 5-game winning streak to go from 3-6 to 8-6. And that was the Washington Broncos, back to back. They had a chance to win out and go 10-6 and whatever, and they wind up losing those last 2 games.
Yes.
Against Washington and the Broncos.
I think the Washington game was played at the Metrodome and was flexed to a Sunday night game.
Yeah, it was.
And who was the Washington quarterback? Was it Collins? Was it Todd Collins? What the heck was his? What the heck was the Washington quarterback?
Todd Collins, man. What a pull, dude.
It was a very uninspiring
Clinton
game.
Portis threw a touchdown pass against the Vikings in that game.
I think, if I'm not wrong about this, I want to say this is right around the time that Sean Taylor was tragically killed in that break-in. And so Washington was super emotional at the time. But yeah, the Vikings then went to play the Broncos, and that was all she wrote.
Didn't do so. Then they made the playoffs the next year, and then the Brett Favre season, whatever. But there it is. All right, great pie chart, man. That was great work by you.
Thank you. I'd like to give credit to multitude of people on these pie charts.
Well, if you guys have ideas for historical pie charts we haven't done yet, let us know. Hit us up via the feedback section of the Score North app, or just tweet us your ideas. But that's it. This is the official record book now. Peterson, 35%. Offensive line, 20%. Vikings PR for notifying the coaching staff, 15%.
Yep.
Robert Ferguson, blocking wide receiver, 10%. Jim Kleinsasser, 5%. Luis Castillo's injury, 5%. T-Jack and Brooks Bollinger being incompetent passers, 5%. And then the Chargers finding a way to get out of their hotel rooms and party the night before. That's your official historical pie chart of praise.
The Rock knows how you feel about pie.
For Adrian Peterson breaking the single game rushing record. Purple Daily Vikings Entertainment.